CNBC TV18 presents Industry Knowledge Exchange Conclave in partnership with SAP, and I'm your host, Ruchira Sharma. This exclusive series brings together leading experts from across sectors to map industry level transitions and create a roadmap for the future. The conclave also aims to highlight the critical role that technology and innovation plays for all sectors and create a robust roadmap towards building tech powered centricity across all verticals. The global pandemic has exposed the weaknesses of traditional supply chain models. The ensuing lockdowns, disruptions compelled manufacturers and retailers to rethink their supply chain models and reimagine it for tomorrow's needs. Digital supply chain models present a huge window of opportunity. And against this backdrop, the world is also looking at India as one of the biggest growth markets. So, how can we leverage this opportunity to herald a vibrant new era of resilient and sustainable supply chain management? And that is the topic of our discussion. But before we begin the conversation with industry leaders, let's hear the opening address.
Thank you, CNBC team, for inviting me for this keynote address on one of the most important topic of our current times, that is the resilient and the sustainable supply chain. I had an occasion to be at Glasgow, and this particular topic was one of the most favored discussion over there. They added on to it the ethical part of it, so it was resilient, sustainable, and ethical supply chain. Definitely. Now, during this pandemic, during this COVID times, it was seen beyond any reasonable doubt that countries which have control over the supply chain end to end, those who have got proper tie ups, and those who ensure that the robustness, the resilience, the sustainability, and the ethical standards of that supply chain is retained, they are the country which are able to prosper, bounce back to their normal position even beyond that once the pandemic is over. Now, today, India has emerged as one of the biggest growth markets globally. We are attracting investments, and you see that the way the way government is absolutely aggressive as far as attracting investments are concerned. And fortunately, the private sector, both domestic as well as international, they are also responding positively to it. So we have got a set of PLI schemes, production linked incentive schemes, that are aimed at increasing the manufacturing standards of India to the global best of the levels, and that is what is being taken forward in the infrastructure connectivity vertical. That particular stream, we see that the roads and the railways, the waterways and the civil aviations, the smart city concepts that have come in, the urbanization, how to manage the urbanization, how to manage it all the more so well, that is another concept. And in the green mobility field, especially, for example, the advanced chemistry cell PLI scheme is there. There is another PLI scheme for automobile components with lot of thrust, lot of emphasis on the green mobility part of it, on the advanced technology part of it. So these are industries are transcending to digitize. So digital solution is one of the key precepts, one of the key prescription for taking a particular supply chain to the level of resilience, sustainability, and ethical standards. Technology has to be there. If the digital version of supply chain, if it is digitally flowing from end to end, that means that the supply chain is robust, it is transparent, it is confirming to the best of the ethical standards, and it cannot be tampered so easily. So that is one area. Now, once we get into the digital spectrum, that means that both the planning and the execution, they are now synchronized. So I can give it an example. Suppose if you are planning a railway line, then you should be knowing that what other forms of connectivity is existing in that area, what are the other interventions that government and the private players are taking in that area. Then only such a planning will be a kind of holistic planning. That is very, very important. Now, you see, you must have heard of a concept of Gati Shakti that our Honorable Prime Minister announced on 15th of August, just to kind of synchronize the initiatives, diverse initiatives, so that the delivery mechanism is brought to a very, very high standards of robustness, and the time and the cost overruns are plugged. The system is brought out from the silos, and a holistic approach, holistic delivery system is achieved. Now, these are the factors how we achieve the sustainability of it. Now, you see, this is a factor of different initiatives. They have to be kind of stitched together. Then only such a supply chain ecosystem is developed. So, digital version is one there, end to end kind of thinking is another, a holistic approach to the entire thing is third of the initiatives. And as you see, that the government initiatives are absolutely emphatic. It is clear that government wants to, before any new connectivity, government wants to get into the spectrum of all the preparedness. So end to end preparedness, they are trying to get into land acquisition and getting the approvals. Once all those things are brought into position, brought into place, then it is left for the private sector. It should be left to the private sector to take it forward, because government, they have shown the commitment that we are not in the we will be we will be just providing a kind of role of an enabler, and the actual move forward is to be taken by the private players. And that is where there is a synchronized initiative of both private and the public initiatives, and so that the entire thing can be taken forward. So it's a wonderful topic, and I'm sure that the speakers, the arguments, the questions that will follow on this particular topic of resilience and sustainability of supply chain, this is that will be very, very enlightening, and it will add on. I shall be grateful if the findings that are taken out of this entire conclave is sent across to me for a learning, and kind of I will also be watching through. And yes, in the current times, when India is trying to leapfrog to a global best of the standards, and this is the time when the world is also looking towards India because of its inherent strength of skill sets and the manpower that we have. It is very important that the supply chain that we create, the supply chain, both greenfield as well as those which are already existing, those supply chains have to be resilient, they have to be sustainable, they have to be robust, and they have to be ethically best of the standards, so that India can be globally best in the area of industry and otherwise. So thanks again to CNBC, and thanks to all the participants who are going to follow. And I'm sure this discussion will be very, very enlightening, and it will have a lot of takeaway out of this interaction.
Hello and welcome to the CNBC TV18 Industry Knowledge Exchange Conclave in partnership with SAP. And I'm your host, Ruchira Sharma. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed vulnerabilities in the existing model and reiterated the fact that organizations need to be agile and future ready. Supply chain leaders are at the forefront of this dynamic scenario, offering businesses the right tools to propel growth by building responsive, resilient, and sustainable supply chains. In fact, in this regard, India is being viewed as one of the biggest growth markets with the potential to become the manufacturing hub of the world. The government has also been undertaking massive investments to improve infrastructure, build megacities, and improve connectivity. But to turn this growth potential into a reality requires a realignment and a reimagination of the supply chain model into a digital supply chain network. And that is the topic for our discussion: resilient and sustainable supply chain. And for that, we have with us esteemed panelists. So I would like to introduce them. Mr. Atul Gupta, Head of Corporate Optimization, Indian Oil Corporation Limited. Mr. Pushp Kumar Nair, Head SCM Lubricants, Bharat Petroleum Corporation Limited. Mr. Swaminathan R, Chief Supply Chain Officer, Aditya Birla Fashion and Retail Limited. Mr. Samrat Sehgal, Supply Chain Management, Head at Dabur India. Mr. Mohit Johri, Head Supply Chain Management, Shriram Pistons and Rings Limited. Mr. Rajesh Gupta, Head Supply Chain at JK Tires and Industries Limited. And we also have with us Mr. Ritesh Prakru, Head Digital Supply Chain at SAP. So thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us for this very special show. And before we begin, I just would like to set some context here. So the COVID-19 pandemic has forced entire industries to rethink and transform their global supply chain model. And it has exposed vulnerabilities in the existing model. And supply chain leaders are now at the forefront of this dynamic scenario. They have to offer businesses the right tools to propel growth and pivot to growth. So the government has also been taking massive investments to improve the infrastructure, build megacities, and improve connectivity. But turning this growth potential into a reality requires a reimagination of the supply chain network into a digital supply chain network. And that is the topic for today: how to build resilient and sustainable supply chain. So I'd like to begin by asking you, Mr. Pushp, according to a recent study, the business goal of a digital supply chain is to deliver the right product. So what are the critical factors in your mind which contribute to building a sustainable and end-to-end operations, and how did you manage disruptions in your industry particularly?
Thank you, Ruchira. In fact, last 1.5 year has been truly disruptive. There has been too much of volatility in both demand and supply side. We have faced equal challenges, not only from the customer side because of COVID, but
Mhm.
also a lot of our suppliers have been affected very, very badly initially, and subsequently also the global supply chain continues to be challenged in so many input materials.
All
So,
right.
so the way we are looking at is not only digitization
Mhm.
at BPCL for our lubricants business, we are deploying a total supply chain transformation. That is to right from the stage of manufacturing to warehousing to logistics, the connect with our retailers, consumers, mechanics. So the end-to-end value chain, we are engaging with them so that we can observe we can get the visibility of the channel, and we can adjust our strategies according to that. So we are in the midst of implementing a total digital transformation across our supply chain.
All right. So coming to you, Mr. Swaminathan, what are your thoughts here? How do you think you came over the disruptions, and what were the strategies that you used to overcome them?
Hi, as everyone knows, the apparel industry and the retail industry has been one of the hardest hit in the COVID. And we use this opportunity to dramatically change our processes. In fashion industry, the mind to market time, from the time we start designing a range and we deliver it to the store, the mind to market time has been anywhere between 8 to 9 months. This is a
Sure.
this is a pretty long time for any industry, and this is one of the challenges of the industry. So this lead time has two components. One is the preparation which happens, in terms of designing the range, and then the second part is the delivery, actual supply, sourcing and delivery of the product. What we
All right.
set the target to ourselves is to reduce this lead time by 1/3, where
Sure.
we digitized our pre-production processes, the design processes completely to reduce the lead time, and our target is to move to anywhere between 5 to 6 months in terms of design to delivery. Yeah, this has been one of the initiatives which we believe will dramatically change in our our working capital model, our freshness at stores, our overall performance as an organization, and as well, we think, we believe we'll be leading in terms of digitalization journey here.
All right. Thank you, sir, for sharing your insights there. But coming to you, Mr. Atul, how did you integrate your supply chain, and what were the kind of obstacles you faced? How did you overcome them? And what are your learnings from this experience?
Well, I would say that the supply chain of petroleum products for Indian oil is truly a global chain, wherein the supply chain length is about 6 months,
Sure.
when about 20% of our food, what we source, is indigenous, so about 15%, and about 85% is imported, for which we have to plan and place orders about for 5 to 6 months in advance of the actual requirement date, of the actual date when the product is required in the market. So when this COVID happened, when this disruption happened in March 2020, we already had about 2 million tons of crude oil in the pipeline, which had already floated from the various sale ports. There
Sure.
was another 1 million ton for which we had already placed orders. So, one, the demand went down all of a sudden. Second, we were part of the essential services, but nearly 50% of our produce, or the output of the food, was not marketable. We had to run the system with only 50%. For that purpose, we had to redesign our processes in the system, and for which the entire technology backup which we had created over the years since 2005, that came into picture.
All
We have
right.
got a supply chain optimization tool available with us, which matches the requirements of the 9 refineries, 129 distribution points for petroleum, 100 LPG petroleum points, and 30,000 LPG, 40,000 LPG distributors and retail outlet. The entire supply chain was tweaked to ensure that the LPG, which was the most essential commodity at that time, that was met, demand of that was met in full. Petrol that was met in full. The most difficult part was for us was to arrange for the trucks, the drivers, to
All right.
reach the product to their customer, to the retail outlets. The learning
Sure.
from this entire exercise, what has happened is, one, the supply chain, there has to be sufficient flexibility in the supply chain, the robustness, in the sense we should have tankages, we should have available capacities at the retail outlets, at our systems, so as any disruption is there, that should be taken care of by storing additional product. Third is
All
the
right.
human, which comes into picture, the drivers to come to the job in spite of the restrictions, in spite of they being ostracized from their families, from their villages, and coming to the work. That was the major learning key. You have to connect with the human. Apart
Sure.
from the SEO, a human is the main part of the human, is the person who has to be taken care of. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you. So, Mr. Mohit, I'd like you to add your inputs here. What are the obstacles that you had faced, and how did you overcome them?
Thank you, Ruchira. In fact, this was a catastrophe of unknown proportions. I mean, as I would put it, we never thought that something of this kind could happen to our industry per se, being in the automotive sector. And we had huge challenges. In fact, Mr. Gupta just spoke about the inventory challenge. We had huge inventory challenges wherein all the material which was in transit landed up with us. It was not getting consumed. So we had to live with a piled up inventory and
Yes.
a lot of other challenges. I mean, digitizing, while it was already in place, the digitalization effort was already there and it was happening. But to fast track it, to make people more aware of what they needed to do, because work from home, especially for a supply chain professional who has to be actually on the ground, working from
Has its
home
own
was
challenges.
was a major challenge, and we had to actually digitally make our people literate on that front. We had to give them VPN accesses. We had to train them how to manage calls, and once we were able to do it, then the life actually transformed. I mean, the catastrophe which came our way actually ended up becoming a boon in the long term, because we ended up digitizing the entire chain end to end, from say our customer's customer to our supplier's supplier, is what we've been trying to digitize and connect, and that's something which has been a boon. Now we are able to get 50 suppliers on a Zoom call at any point of time, maybe a half an hour short notice, and we are able to address, talk, resolve issues. So catastrophes and these kind of challenges bring with them opportunities. So we harness those opportunities, and here we are. We are doing very well on the digitalization and the connecting front.
Sure. Thank you, sir. And Mr. Rajesh, would you like to add something to this?
Definitely. See, in a supply chain department is supposed to be agile. And during this pandemic, it was really tested to the core. We found that the demand, which became almost nil. Normally, March month is the peak month for sale in the tire industry. So last year, March, when the lockdown was announced, so we were really planning for very high sale. Suddenly, there were the breaks, so the demand overnight became almost nil. And then from nil, after 2-3 months, the demand became very, very high, much more than the capacity. So we, within a span of 2 to 3 months time, we found demand fluctuating between 0 to almost, let me use the word, infinite. So whatever was there, we could produce or supply, everything was consumed. So this time the challenges are many, whether it is transportation, whether it is on the road or the drivers availability, people falling sick, depot and warehouses when to open. There were lockdowns at different times. So sometimes, and we had to use a lot of creativity. Let me use this word, creativity, agility, so that sometimes the shop is open only for 2 hours in the morning, between 5 to 6. The people used to go, open the shop, give the tires. Many times the ambulances orders, the hospitals orders were coming for the tires. The feeders and depots were closed. So we were asking them, we asked them that you come and collect. And like that, lot of across India. Another thing which I found was that there was a lot of team spirit. Because of this problem, each and every department, each and every one came very, very close that how to come closer to customer. So agility, then relationship building, team spirit, and then automation. Basically, definitely we have a lot of, you can say, digital solutions. Then Zoom calling, phone calling. Normally in companies we don't have these kind of you can say tools used extensively with vendors or within the company, but we are using it. In fact, we are working 24/7. So we were at home. So it was basically anytime, anyone, and all the top management or the field, each and everyone was available. So it was really wonderful experience. Let me say that.
Definitely. So I'd like to bring Mr. Samrat in here. I'd like to ask you, sir, how critical is the integration of supply chain planning with the rest of the business? And do you think businesses have done enough to create a seamlessly integrated ecosystem?
So I think supply chain as a function, it has been evolving, for the last 12, 15 years. You will see the importance of the supply chain function has, gone up notches. Every year there has been a change which has been seen by the people. However, during the pandemic, what we have realized that it was not the brands which were competing with each other during the pandemic period. It were the supply chains which were competing. All the supply chains which were agile, which were able to adapt themselves, those were the companies which were actually successful, and their products were reaching the customers, and they were able to achieve sales and serve the society at that point of time. So that's the way I look at it. Today and tomorrow and going forward for years to come, it will be the supply chains which will be competing with each other, and hence the organizations which realize the importance of the function will be the ones which will be able to differentiate in the marketplace. That's the way I look at it. Many organizations I would like to bring in here, at this point of time, have realized that already, and they are actually investing in the area of supply chain. They, the caliber of people they are, deploying, in investment in infrastructure, investment in technology. A big share of that is actually going to supply chain. Whether all organizations have done it, I think it's an evolution which is, happening, and the pace of evolution has actually increased during the lockdown. That's the way I look at it.
Definitely. So, Mr. Mohit, would you like to share your inputs here? Do you think companies have done enough when it comes to seamlessly integrating supply chains?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question again. All your questions that you put up in advance as well, I found them very interesting. In fact, I had coined a term by the name of 3C. What these 3 C's mean is connectivity, collaboration, and
Mhm.
customer satisfaction. So
All right.
the three C's point at connectivity, to collaborate, and then ensuring customer satisfaction. So in while doing this, what you have to do is you have to share a lot of information and data across the chain.
Sure.
And the more you share information, as Samrat just pointed out, it's going
Mhm.
to be collaboration which is going to drive the future. I mean, you cannot live in silos and think that you're going to achieve a lot. If you collaborate, you're going to harness the benefits of collaboration, and the customer expectations are going to increase. There's no end to customer expectations. So companies which use, say, operations research, which use artificial intelligence, which use algorithms, are
Mhm.
the ones who are going to drive the supply chain or define the supply chain of the future. So a lot of collaboration is what I would suggest is going to happen in the near to short term to the long term. And
Mhm.
I mean, you have to digitize, but digitization entails a lot of money expenditure. Not all
Right.
companies can afford it. So the focus has to be on low cost automation. You have to harness ideas from the grassroots, talk to your people down the line, get their ideas and utilize them using your own, maybe own IT setups, which we at Shriram Pistons did. We digitized a lot of stuff, automated a
Mhm.
lot of information flow across the supply chain, but using very, very small tools. I mean, we harnessed SAP like anything. We extracted data from SAP and used it
Mhm.
to send auto alerts to our business partners. So,
All
I
right.
mean, very, very simple thing to do, but it creates
But
a lot of
it's a lot
visibility
of
across the supply
opportunity.
chain.
Yes.
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 So
Definitely.
collaboration, I would say, is something for the future. I mean, that's going to take us through.
All right. So I'd like to bring you in here, Mr. Ratish. Of course, we've heard about supply chain disruptions and how they can be managed by leaders. So, as a key enabler in the technology space, what is your learning here? What are the kind of trends that you've been seeing, especially over the last 18 months since the pandemic hit?
Sure, ma'am. Over the past 2 years, change has been the only constant around all of us. And this pandemic also has changed everything and tested our resilience. Businesses, as we see, are seeing changes in consumer behaviors, newer business models are evolving, variations in production and plant capacities, and constant changes in supplier commitments.
Sure.
Consumers are now engaging differently, they are working differently, buying differently, and basically living a virtual life. Uh, with health and safety the top of the mind for every consumer, we are seeing
Mhm.
visible demand spikes in consumption patterns in categories like groceries, home and office essentials, and health and fitness products. And with these social distancing norms and India's smartphone user base at about 400 million, we are
Mhm.
observing a huge uptake in consumer e commerce spending, where order transparency and easy access to the internet is further driving consumer behavior.
All right.
So now supply chains have transitioned from being something in the back end to the front end center for businesses and are now helping organizations deliver enhanced consumer experiences. Today,
Definitely.
digitization is not a luxury, not a necessity, but an imperative for all of us.
Definitely. So I'd like to bring you in here, Mrs. Swaminathan. E-commerce is booming, and while the customers are enjoying the benefits of direct to home, what does this mean for supply chain leaders, and what are the key challenges? And what would be your asks if you had to address these challenges of an e-commerce supply chain?
I agree with you. E-commerce is really changing the way consumers buy. Even in industry like ours, where the consumers used to prefer a touch and feel, they used to prefer to visit the store and choose the styles and choose the designs. It's dramatically changing. In fact, the digital penetration has nearly doubled in the last 1.5 years. And this is a big change, and organizations have to really respond to this new change, new paradigm of consumers buying digitally. One of the,
Yes.
I would say, one or two critical changes I would say is, one is we need to plan for merchandise assortment quite differently here. The number of options and the number of designs being available, the width of the categories and what we need to offer is need to be thought through much critically, and need to be appropriate for this channel. We need to really plan for this. The second biggest change I would say is creating hyper local delivery capability.
All right.
In fact, that I think is changing, where consumers are getting used to goods getting delivered at a faster, shorter lead time.
All right.
That is the paradigm is getting shifted every if we can say every 3 months. A new
Yes.
paradigm is getting created. So we are in fact focusing on building a very robust hyperlocal delivery system where we can leverage our presence, retail presence, as well as our distribution network to be able to service the customers at very short lead time. We would like our focus would be to serve the customer on the same day, and
All
that is
right.
the kind of direction which we are working with. And this, I think, will be the direction of change in the industry, I presume.
All right. Responding to customer demand immediately is, according to you, the most important requirement. But coming to you, Mr. Samrat, what would be the ask if you would have to address challenges of an e-commerce supply chain?
Yeah, so I think e-commerce supply chain, throws up a totally different challenge to the supply chain professional. If you ask from a customer's point of view, he's able to transfer money to the organization at the speed of light. His expectation is we should be able to, transfer the product at the speed of light. It's a more informed customer. You have rating systems on the websites or on the apps, which, typically every time the product is delivered, the customer experience which you give, apart from the quality of the product, is also, equally important. So
Sure.
all these things have to be, kept in mind while you design your processes. As an organization, as a supply chain function, earlier we used to think about, it used to be more inventory centric, supply chains. More time and effort was spent on how to manage the inventory. But now it is completely different. You have to actually design all your processes keeping the customer in mind. Customer is the king. It's a universal truth. But today it is more important because these technologies, these platforms have given greater power in the hands of the customer, and everything, the way they interact with the product, the way they interact with the service in terms of delivery experience, everything becomes very, very important. From the supply chain point of view, of course, you have to be more flexible now. It's a new channel which is getting developed, direct to customer and e-commerce, e-commerce platforms per se, and direct to customer, your own e-commerce platform. These are, the ways in which business is going to happen. And, these are the segments which are going to grow in the coming years. And I think technology adoption will be very, very critical here, so integration of the whole supply chain, the end-to-end visibility, quality of the product, aging of the inventory, the shelf life. These are, going to be very, very important and critical aspects which one will have to manage in greater, on a greater, you can say frequency, or maybe with a bigger lens, you'll have to manage all these things. So that's the additional challenge which comes with these platforms.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Samrat, for sharing those insights. Would you like to add something here, Mr. Rajesh?
If you see what I found during this pandemic and the last 1.5 years particularly, there's a lot of need for the mindset change. If you see, like you were saying in the beginning, in the introduction itself, that the government itself is changing a lot of, you can say, the processes, systems, the infrastructure investment which is happening across India, particularly in supply chain. Supply chain department, which used to be a back, you can say, department and often forgotten. Now is becoming a very important department. And I'll just share that in our own organization, we have done a lot of transformation, and the entire team revamp, training, development, process improvement, digitalization. A lot of things have happened, particularly in supply chain. And what we are doing is that, not only that, it is not like they are saying in English, enough is not enough. Even more can be done. So what we are planning is that next 5 years, the blueprint we have already prepared, that what are the areas where we need to focus on, what are the like the customer is demanding more and more demanding, the so much of dynamics happening in the market, particularly if we see export. We are doing export to about 100 countries. So some other things keep on happening across the world. So for us, it is not only India, it is actually an entire globe. What is happening, we get material from various places, we export to various places. So how to really integrate each and everything, different time zones, what are the processes we are looking at this, what you can say is going to happen maybe in the next 4 5 years to the best of our knowledge, even if the growth is very high or suddenly there is a disruption somewhere, what are the risks involved, how to mitigate the risk, what are the you can say each and every area, whether it is process, people, whether it is their own performance, vendors performance,
All right.
digitalization, a lot of things are being done actually. So very you
Definitely.
can say um, promising, let me use this word, promising future for particularly supply chain professionals.
Definitely. And as you said, mitigating known and unknown risks is also something we need to look into. But coming back to you, Mr. Ritesh, earlier you mentioned a very interesting point about e-commerce. So when we look at e-commerce from a consumer perspective, with so many people staying at home, there is a lot of pressure on supply chains to deliver these goods, as we earlier discussed, at the same speed, like Mr. Samrat said. So particularly, this puts the focus on planning and logistics. So what is your view on this one?
Absolutely. Meeting customer expectations for this changing e-commerce phase is putting tremendous pressure on supply chains. While optimizing cost had always been at the core, organizations are now seeing the need to sense and respond faster, and hence synchronized planning and execution is becoming a necessary to have the right level of inventory at the right location. History has always been a great teacher, but we realize that now the past cannot always be reliable. And as shared by Mr. Samrat also, organizations now need to have planning as a continuum all throughout the demand, supply, production, logistics phases too.
Sure.
This is where we see the relevance in adopting the concept of synchronized planning is emerging, as it helps bring agility through powerful algorithms, simulative capacities, and hence enabling end-to-end visibility. Many Indian companies have already started discussing and on this journey with us and are leveraging SAP to digitize these processes also. Now, instead of having a siloed approach in view, connected planning and execution successfully helps mitigate those risks, respond better to these ever evolving market conditions. To help customers get this end-to-end visibility, SAP is heavily also investing in our logistics business network, where the extending the supply chain network from within the premise to beyond the enterprise, and also cover shippers, transporters, logistics providers, so that the end-to-end last mile visibility is given to the consumers and the businesses too.
All right, sure. So I'd like to bring you in, Mr. Atul here. When we talk about stock optimization and warehouse management, there is a lot of key focus here. So what are the changes that you wish to see in this space?
The changes, means one is the e-commerce, and as everybody has been talking about, the logistics, the focus has been on the logistics part. But now the focus has to shift to the core competencies of the people. The collaboration, what we have been talking about, at various people have been talking, various colleagues have been talking about, the collaboration picture, or they have been core competencies. A person manufactures. If Indian Oil is there, Indian Oil is into manufacturing, and then we have to outsource the transportation segments. Same way, when you talk of collaboration, possibly the manufacturing is done by one agency, the transportation, the entire planning, the plan connectivity, that is being done by the other agency. Now the issue is how to track that. And for that, the issue, the customer is, as it has been said, the customer is impatient. The customer has got various options. So we have to give, or the customer has to be told where his order is, and that's where the essence of this entire process would lie. As the customer having the key where to track. Second would come, okay, how does the customer be, what I'll say in this sense, the connectivities which are being given. For that, we are investing into a process wherein the entire process is tracked, entire truck movement is tracked through GPS. We get it. And also, to achieve customer satisfaction, we are entering into a domain. We were finding that a lot of customer product movement was happening in an incorrect way, in a dangerous way. The inflammable materials were being handled. So we have entered into a domain to take the product direct to the customer end, for which normally like DG sets, they cannot be brought to the retail outlets. For that, we have designed a system to take the product right to the customer, And that was much appreciated during this COVID times when the DG sets or the heavy machineries, they could not be, the trucks were not moving and they could not be brought over to the filling points. So the take finally is going to be the collaboration, what we are talking about, the speed and the connectivity to the humans. That's what we are coming to.
Sure. Mr. Push, would you like to share your insights on this?
In terms of e-commerce, what I would say is that in lubricant industry, it's not only the product but also the service gap that goes with it. So in lubricants, mechanics play a very key role, workshops and mechanics. So therefore, what we are approaching is that it's not only taking the product to the customers, but also enabling through technology and through engagement our associates how to take that service to customers in addition to taking the product to customers. So that's what we are trying to create. Of course, this creates a lot of last mile challenges, a lot of SKU configurations. There is a change of customer preferences when they deal in smaller numbers. So it has its own challenges. So that's how we are approaching it. Other part I would say is that in terms of like what Mr. Samrat mentioned some time back, that it is not organizations which are competing with each other, but rather the SCM teams which are stronger are bringing the companies to forefront. I would like to add one more trend which we are witnessing is that since prices of every input material is going up, and in turn the customer is not willing to pay that much price, so which means that the bottom line is now going to be dictated by how strong a supply chain team is going to be. So therefore, those points of integrating supply chain with entire value chain. So what we are working on is not only supply chain in isolation, but integrating the supply chain with various components, be it internal ERP, be it our loyalty offerings to customers, be your dealer management softwares, be the way we give rewards to the customers. So all entire gamut of things, how we engage with the customers. So everywhere, this is playing a big role, and technology is helping us do that.
Definitely. So technology is definitely playing a critical part. So I'd like to come to you, Mr. Swaminathan and Mr. Mohit, if you could take this one by one. What is your view on supply chain automation within your industry? And how do you see the role of new age technologies like AI, IoT, and ML in the supply chain? And which are the processes that you are leveraging to overcome the current challenges?
See, I would say one is the automation is playing a key role now. In terms of, we have thousands of retail outlets, and we used to manually decide what needs to be dispatched to each store. This didn't happen during the pandemic. This we had prepared even before the pandemic. We have been in this process. We completely automated the process of dispatching to the store. Otherwise it used to be a manual intervention where by an allocator had to allocate what style to be sent to which store, when it is to be sent, and we realized this process is absolutely impossible manually. And we have completely automated this process, and processes like these are extremely critical to be automated, and this is where the technology will play a key role. They will do it better than people. People can improve the process, can improve the tool. We need to focus on improving the tool, automation process, than actually doing the job. And this is a big mind shift change. In fact, the mindset required to improve the process is very different from me actually doing it. So this is one area where we have, automation has been one of the areas for us in terms of, driving. Even in manufacturing, we have focused on automation to be able to reduce the operating times and as well as improve the quality. In terms of AI/ML deployment, I would say it is again, we used to forecast what to buy for a season. So that is the really I would say, very experienced people with a lot of insights are required to be able to forecast what is required, what designs to buy, how much to buy. This process, even with a lot of experience, a lot of data putting together, we were probably right 50 to 60% of the time. And that is the level of accuracy we could achieve. And with AI and computer vision and AI, we are in the process of piloting these tools where we can forecast which design would sell well and in which region. So this is going to help us to identify the designs, how much to buy, and where to position them. So this is the direction of change, I would say, in terms of in the apparel industry, and I think we should. This will dramatically improve the. What I can say is the sell through of the what we buy. We call it sell through because how much of sold of what we bought. So this will dramatically improve the merchandise performance, and consumers would enjoy because they would find more of what they like and more of fast selling goods in the stores. And this is the two areas where I can think of.
All right.
Yeah. So I
Your
mean,
comments?
yeah,
Yes.
just building on what my co-panelists have said. So, see, the theme that we have adopted is making person redundant. I mean, people dependent policies and people dependent processes have to be made redundant. It has to be automated to the extent possible so that people don't, I mean, take decisions. It's a guided decision based on data, based on replenishment models. For example, we have replenishment models in place which automate the replenishment of inventories across the entire supply chain. Now,
Sure.
one of my co-panelists spoke about the geopolitical issues. We also face a lot of geopolitical issues, having more than 70 odd customers across 50 countries, and similarly a lot of input raw material coming in from more than 20 odd countries. So we are automating all those inputs to integrate into one large database. We already have those kind of databases in place wherein they talk to each other. For example, if the outflow is reducing, then the input gets moderated accordingly, and if there's a increased outflow, then the input gets jacked up accordingly. So we have those real-time triggers in place, and ultimately the objective that we are driving at is making the customer feel most important. Whether it's a B2B customer or a B2C customer, all organizations have to make sure that the customer feels important. And how can you do it? You have to give him a lot of information real time at that. Once you provide that information to the customer, he feels involved in your business. So the
Yes.
companies who are able to integrate the customer in their whole knowledge database and keep him informed. There could be delays, there could be issues in the supply chains, as all of my co-panelists would agree. There could be thousands of issues at the back end, a few hundred in the front end. But as long as you are able to inform and intimate the customer in advance, he won't mind aligning with you and being with you for the long term. That's how we look at it.
Sure. So, Mr. Samrat, what would you like to add to this? What are the technologies that are changing that have been a game changer in your industry?
So I think the way I look at it is basically, two things which have happened dramatically during this period. One is from an ROI model. So whenever you wanted to, earlier look at a tool, implement something, bring about a change, which required some investment, the CEOs would be looking at, what's the return on investment. Today, automation and, adoption of technology is something which is very, very important. It's a matter of survival now. So no one is looking at the ROIs. It actually is something where, organization is actually pushing you to play with technologies, adopt technologies, so that, they can benefit you in the long run. In the short run, even if there is no ROI, no one, is too much worried, because everyone understands that it's a matter of survival. And tomorrow, definitely, it's the way of working is going to be through adoption of these technologies. So this is the first thing. Second thing which has happened is a lot of, tech companies and institutes like NITI, they are, coming up with models, and they are offering solutions at a very, very low cost. And people are willing to do pilots with the organization. So you are allowed to play with some of these technologies and sense yourself, which of these technologies is going to fit you more than the other one. So that comparison can be done easily. We ourselves are currently working on at least more than 2 platforms to find out which of these will be able to use it in long run. So these 2 big changes have happened, which are helping us actually play with some of these technologies. Now, which ones we really think we'll be able to adopt? I think in terms of some of the key functions of supply chain, which is replenishment and planning the whole replenishment cycle, order processing. These are the key areas where adoption of these technologies will be much faster. Some of the other back-end problem solving, where of course people dependence will remain. So those will continue the way they are.
All right, sure. Fine. So just before we wrap up, one last question to you, Mr. Ritesh. Definitely, we're all talking about supply chain automation, but there are multiple facets to the supply chain, from manufacturing to demand planning, sales, operation, warehouse, and logistics and management. And through a discussion, it is very evident that there is a need for them to be all seamlessly integrated. So as a technology leader, how are you enabling businesses to bring all these processes together and create a integrated and seamless supply chain network?
So as shared by fellow panelists, Mr. Pushpakumar and Rajesh ji also, supply chain is an integrated process, and hence all of SAP supply chain solutions are logical extensions or closely integrated with the digital core. Right. SAP's approach to digital supply chain is spread across 5 integrated pillars, namely design, planning, manufacture, deliver, and operate, with sustainability, innovation, and analytics spanning across each one of them. So maybe give you a parallel. Try to envisage all the supply chain pillars as the different runners of a relay race. Here, each pillar is designed to perform its piece to perfection, and then is supposed to hand it over to the next runner efficiently, so that the next pillar can excel and win the leg of the race. So this approach enables end-to-end visibility and also helps gives customer an integrated process map and view of their entire integrated supply chain. And we are also seeing this on the shop floor too. We are leveraging Industry 4.0 to improve productivity, build intelligence across operations, ultimately leading to self-learning systems. And we're delivering all of this with our strategic partners like Siemens, Microsoft, Honeywell, and all of them others. With this integrated end-to-end view and coverage, we are helping customers build agility and responsiveness to these ever-changing market conditions.
All right. So SAP is also focusing very strongly on sustainability and supporting global businesses with this. But I'd like each one of you to take this last question and give me a quick answer here. That how do you foresee 2022 for supply chain leaders in your industry? What will be the top priorities? And looking ahead, what are the imperatives for a robust supply chain model? So we can start with you, Mr. Ratu.
So number one, the impact, we have already gone through one phase of COVID. And now one thing which is again looming large is Omicron. We do not know as to how it is going to unfold. Well, 2022, we are going to start on the note of with this Omicron. Let's see how it happens. But the important thing is that now what is going to be the inventory levels which we need to maintain to meet the customer requirements with this thing which is on our hand. Second is we have to again I'm talking from the point of view of the petroleum industry, alignment of the industry with the environmental norms which are coming up. With the changing environmental norms, possibly there are many things which are changing now. We have introduced BS6. We are now, there are some other fuels also wherein the sulfur content is going to be reduced. Some products are being banned in various states. So we now have to have a relook on our processes, by way of which we can cut down on the products which are being removed from the marketing network. We also have to relook or create market for some other products which are going to come up in view of that, and also as to meet the industry requirements which are focused or being dependent on these products which are now not going to be available. Third is for the petroleum industry, the impact of PNG, CNG, and the EVs which are coming into the system. Basically, I'm saying environmental conditions, the ecosystem which is changing, we have to align with that. And that is going to be a major challenge for the petroleum industry, and also the supply chain has to be aligning with that. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. So, a quick tip on what are the imperatives for a robust supply chain and what does the road ahead look like? So, Mr. Samrat, you can take this.
So I think 2021 and 2022, they will not be too different with each other. I think the challenges will remain. What will be different will be the way people will be reacting to it, because we now have a better prepared supply chain all across, various companies. So whether
Yes.
it is, us at Dabur, I think the supply chain is much more prepared. Focus definitely, I think, will remain on last mile. So whether, the importance of, direct to customer platforms or e-commerce, it will remain high. I think last mile connectivity for, the traditional trade. So if there are challenges of lockdown again, companies will be, the focus will be on how you are able to reach the retailer, bypassing, some of the traditional trade channels. So on the distribution side, I think these will be the challenges. On the other side, I think end-to-end connectivity and, visibility of data. So this is going to be very, very key. So, to understand how the demand is changing at, because lockdown brings, one more big challenge which comes with the lockdown is, variation in the demand. So the products which are selling, that changes completely. So having end-to-end visibility of your supply chain, starting from how the customer's demand is, changing, and what are the challenges on the other side at the supplier end, and making sure that, decision making, whether you're at home or whether you're in office, you are able to drive those decisions to make sure that, the supply chain remains agile and all the bottlenecks within the supply chain are, continuously removed. So, this is the way it is going to be, but you will definitely see a better prepared supply chain.
All right. Mr. Swaminathan, what will be your top priorities in the coming years?
I think I will quickly list 3 points. One is all organizations would want to improve the supply chain reliability in these uncertain times. So consolidation and working closely with vendors is going to be one of the key priorities, and probably nearshoring of most of your, you would want to produce most of your goods as close to you as possible, as close to the market as possible. That is one of the direction of change I see. Second is, making the supply chain agile. It is important to understand that we cannot predict all the situations, how it will pan out in the future. It is not possible for us to predict. So we as organizations should be able to respond to these changes in terms of consumer demand, in terms of supply chain bottlenecks. So agility, I would say, focusing on agility, building a robust agile SNOP processes will be the second focus area. Third focus area would be with e-commerce really growing, building hyperlocal delivery capability would be the third focus, I presume, for industries like us.
Definitely. Thank you, sir. And Mr. Mohit and Mr. Rajesh, if you could tell me what do you foresee as the big changes for supply chain leaders and what are your top priorities?
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing which is going to be a common theme across everything that we do is going to be the 3C approach, wherein we are going to connect, we are going to collaborate, and we are going to ensure that the customer is satisfied. So that's the 3C approach. That's going to be the entire dovetail thing which is going to be with us going forward. Localization is one focus area because we have to have, I mean, the supply chain as responsive as possible, because localization is the way to go. Because if we have long backend or front, I mean, long backend chains for that matter, they are going to be a dampener considering the geopolitical situations that are going to pan out from time to time. So that's one thing. And most importantly, we are going to focus on skilling and upskilling of our personnel and the supply chain as well. So back end, front end, and our own set of people are going to get trained on how to make the best use of whatever information and data we have, so as to drive the efficiencies in the supply chain. That's how we look at it. So the three things or the four things: 3C approach, localization, being responsive, and skilling and upskilling of the people is what we are going to focus on majorly, and that's going to take care of the rest of it. That's how we
All
look at
right. Mr. Push, would you like to add something there? What are the imperatives
Yeah,
for a robust supply chain for you?
yeah. So just to add, I think already co-panelists have mentioned it. I would say that as we enter 2022, health and safety would be imperative at the first place, because we may see some new challenges in coming months. Already there is a beginning of Omicron. So how do we ensure the health and safety of all our uh, staff, our vendors, their staff, and
All right.
our suppliers? How do they keep their supply chain running for our suppliers also? That's one. Other issue which I think is very important, already mentioned, is the engagement and training and reskilling and building alternate skill sets, again throughout the supply chain, not for one or two
Right.
people. That is the second thing. And thirdly, I would say third theme is going to be the integration, because the way it is, we have seen demand shocks, we have seen supply shocks, and going forward, there will be a dilemma. There is a requirement to optimize inventory to cut down on working capital. At the same time, you have to ensure that product is available at the right time, at the right place. And added to that, there are additional challenges of high cost, and how do you optimize the cost.
All
So
right.
all this requires a single source of truth. So integration is going to be the theme for coming year.
So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us and sharing your insights with us. It was truly an incredible and extremely insightful discussion. And the role of resilient supply chain model in providing a competitive edge to businesses across sectors is critical. To sum up, businesses need resilience and agility, not just in products, but in processes and people to meet the changing demands in the new normal. Thank you all for watching this very special show, and thank you all for joining us.